Hello, my name is Joshua Kitts of the Composed Dream Game Marketplace, and today I want to take a closer look at Killshot from Broken Ruler Games. So, what is Killshot, and what is inside this particular iteration of it? This is Killshot, the Director's Cut, currently available in PDF on the Composed Dream Game Marketplace for $10. This includes $10 Canadian. This includes the Assassin's Journal, which is essentially the player's portion of the game, and the director's direction, hence director's cut. So about half this book is essentially the player's handbook, and the second half is sort of the TM's guide. There are 3 example scenarios or adventures you could take your starting assassins on, 3 jobs where they get to kill different marks, of course. And then there are 5 marks at the end of the direction part of this that you could also use. So the direction part rings in at 75 pages, and the Assassin's Journal portion of this rings in at 76 pages if you include the tracker and the character record. The text in this is pretty small, if I'm being honest. The example text tends to be a little bit bigger, so that is a factor to consider. It's one of the reasons picking it up by PDF and blowing it up to a larger size might be ideal. So the GM in Killshot is called the Director, alluding to somebody handing out jobs in perhaps a special service or something like that. That is not really the flavor, though. The flavor is that you are an assassin for hire for whomever wants to pay you. You're a criminal. You're better than a hitman. Well, you are a hitman, but you're better and more general than a hitman. Killshot is a game for people who want to roll a very large number of dice, get momentum, keep going, and strategize deeply about how they're going to achieve their objectives, the objectives of the job that they've been tasked with. There is a free Killshot number 0 Retribution, I believe. I'll put an image of that up somewhere, which has example assassins you can use, and again about a 20-page adventure you can go on, and a couple adventure supplements for Killshot as well. So Killshot is relatively rules heavy. You use different sized dice for different types of skills or attributes or whatnot that you have. So for instance, you always roll a d20, and the d20 has a couple of interesting effects. Every die type explodes if you roll the maximum on it. So if you roll a 20, it explodes. But if you roll a 20, you also get a training point, and jobs give you training points as well. And there are all sorts of different things that you can spend your training points on. If you roll a 1, however, on that d20, and you always roll the d20, you create an evidence point against you, and the GM keeps track of various evidence points that you can create other ways to see if the long arm of the law is going to track you down. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the law. It can be rival gangs or whatnot. Figure out that you're the person who have been offing their bosses, and realize that they need to come after you. So that's a neat feature. So you always roll a d20. Your basic kind of stats gets you d12s. The situation and equipment gives you d10s, and then various other things for smaller die type. So, for instance, in a scene, each time you kill somebody, you get a d4 that you can use. That's like a death die that you can use on future rolls. But that like expends itself, so you can use it once, and you can decide to use it. So there's a few die types like that you decide to use and when you're going to use it, and they get expended if you do use them. So that's a neat feature. So you're rolling a mitt full of dice. If rolling a mitt full of dice appeals to you, this is a great game for rolling a mitt full of dice. You're adding them all up. The increments of 10 that you succeed, or increments of 10 net you hits. And you compare hits and whether you exceeded the total of the opponent to see what happens. One of the interesting features is you use a tracker, and that tracker has a few different elements on it, but as long as you keep succeeding, there are exceptions to this, you might take an action that breaks it, but as long as your team keeps succeeding, so your team of assassins, for instance, keeps succeeding, you get to keep acting. There are a limited number of action points that your team would have, and eventually it would pass on to another team. And there's also things like triggers. You can plan an interrupt. If somebody does a particular action, then that can transfer the sequence of actions, which is called a series in Killshot. Killshot is heavy enough that if I was running it, I'd want to make sure that when I actually broke out the dice, it was for those important moments. So there's definitely kind of planning phase stuff that you can do that is more role-playing, more straight role-playing versus tactical. There are a lot of different character options. One of those, the rule engine for this is actually called the optional system, so that's not what I meant specifically. But there are a lot of options that you can take in terms of advancing your character, training, skills in particular weapons. So there's kind of a class like one, which is things like, oh, are you a burglar or are you a bomber? I think an explosive expert, essentially. The interior, this is the lovely table of contents for the Assassin's Journal part, and for the Director's Journal direction part. So I just wanted to look. Yeah, so there's like the bomber, the burglar, enforcer, the sniper, these sorts of specialities or focus that sort of acts like class, but I believe you can actually technically have multiple focus. If you advanced your character enough, you could spend your training points on that. The Assassin's Journal part of this in particular is written. I really like it, and it really makes me want to play the game. It has a lot of flavor. It's written like an assassin is writing to you about the job and the business of assassination, and that provides a lot of flavor. That's very interesting. So it's just a fun read as well. Which means, of course, that I should read a section, right? So let's try that. I had a couple sections that I was very interested in reading. All right, I'm going to read a section from the black market. Shopping for gear is not as simple as having the right amount of money. The majority of gear used in this line of work is, to put it lightly, illegal. At best, legality is not the issue so much as evidence leading back to your dirty hands buying it in the first place. Some of the best gear can be used once and must be dumped in the river ASAP or burned in the fireplace before cops knock on your door. There's no better place to find these items with no questions asked than the black market. Purchasing gear through the black market requires an experienced combination of subtlety, swagger, and the proper connections. These merchants are under the gun just like you and rely on discretion and reliability to stay in business. They must not pull the trigger. They may not pull the trigger, but jail time is equal to the crime when supplying the weapon. I think the author Todd strikes a good balance between maintaining that and clarity of rules. I do find it interesting that in most of Broken Ruler games, the GM is called the director, even though Screenplay up here uses the term director for a completely different purpose, and the mechanics are very different, and it's far more of a narrative rules light game. Screenplay. Screenplay is also what powers the High Play and the Samurai setting, so those are also available from Broken Ruler Games on the Composed Dream Game Marketplace. So, if you are the sort of gamer who enjoys a strongly themed game of assassination and death dealing with a bit of careful planning and a degree of complexity to the rules system, and you enjoy rolling a massive mittful of dice, then Killshot should be of interest to you. The PDF is available on the Composed Dream Game Marketplace for $10 Canadian. All of Broken Ruler Games products are set as if US dollar is on par to Canadian, which is certainly not, so there are some savings to be had there if you head to Composed Dream Game Marketplace. Thank you, and good gaming.